Maya had always loved caves. Ever since she was a little girl, she would read books about explorers who went deep underground and discovered hidden worlds. Now, at 32 years old, she was living her dream as a cave researcher. Her job was to study unexplored cave systems and document what she found there. That morning started like any other expedition. Maya checked her equipment 3 times, just like she always did. She had her climbing ropes, her headlamp with extra batteries, enough food and water for 2 full days, a radio, and a backup communication device. She wore her sturdy boots and her favorite red jacket that her mother had given her years ago. It was supposed to be a simple job. Go into the cave, take measurements, make notes, and come back out. The cave entrance was beautiful. Sunlight poured through the opening, making the wet rocks sparkle like diamonds. Maya took a deep breath of fresh mountain air before stepping inside. She turned on her headlamp and began her descent. The cave was amazing. The walls were covered in formations that had taken thousands of years to create. She stopped often to take photos and write in her notebook. Hours passed quickly as she explored deeper and deeper into the earth. The temperature dropped, and she could see her breath in the cold air. Everything was going perfectly. She was discovering passages that no one had ever seen before. This was exactly why she loved her job. Then it happened. Without any warning, Maya heard a sound that made her blood run cold. Before she could even think, rocks began falling from the ceiling. She ran forward, trying to get away from the collapsing section. Dust filled the air, making it hard to breathe. The noise was deafening. When everything finally stopped, Maya stood frozen in place. Her heart was beating so fast she thought it might burst from her chest. She slowly turned around and pointed her headlamp back toward the entrance. Her stomach dropped. Where the passage used to be, there was now just a solid wall of rock and debris. The main entrance was completely blocked. Maya tried to stay calm. She had trained for emergencies. She reached for her radio and pressed the button to call for help. Static. She adjusted the antenna and tried again. More static. The radio must have been damaged when she ran from the rockfall. Okay, she thought, that's why I have a backup device. She pulled out her satellite communicator and turned it on. The screen lit up, but there was no signal. Of course there wasn't. She was too deep underground now. She stood there in the silence, trying to process what had just happened. The only sound was water, dripping somewhere in the distance. And her breathing. She could hear every breath she took, echoing off the cave walls. In. Out. In. Out. It was strange how loud breathing could be when everything else was silent. Maya sat down on a rock and forced herself to think clearly. Panicking would not help. She had supplies. She had light. She had knowledge and experience. The cave system must have another exit. Water always finds a way out. And she could hear water. That meant there was a path. She just had to find it. She pulled out her map and studied it by the light of her headlamp. According to her notes, she had already explored about half of the main tunnel before the collapse. There were several side passages she hadn't checked yet. One of them might lead to another way out. Maya stood up and adjusted her backpack. She took out a piece of chalk and marked a large X on the wall next to the rockfall. This would help her keep track of where she had been. Then, she started walking deeper into the cave. Each step took her further from the blocked entrance, further from the sunlight, further from help. The silence was becoming heavier with each passing minute. She had never experienced quiet like this before. Even at night, in her apartment, there were always sounds. Cars passing by, neighbors moving around, the hum of the refrigerator. Here, there was nothing. Just her footsteps and her breathing. She kept walking, marking her path as she went. The cave twisted and turned. Sometimes the ceiling was so low she had to crawl. Other times, she entered chambers so large, her headlamp couldn't reach the far walls. And through it all, That silence pressed down on her like a physical weight. Maya had been walking for hours now. She checked her watch and realized it was already the middle of the night up on the surface. Down here, there was no difference between day and night. Just the small circle of light from her headlamp cutting through the endless darkness. She found a relatively flat spot and decided to rest. Her legs were tired, and she needed to think about her situation carefully. Maya opened her backpack and took out one of her energy bars. She allowed herself half of it and a few sips of water. She had to make everything last as long as possible. As she sat there eating, the silence became almost unbearable. It pressed against her ears like cotton. She could hear her own heartbeat. She could hear herself swallowing. Every tiny sound seemed amplified in this underground world. Maya realized something that scared her. She had never truly experienced silence before. Not like this. She noticed her headlamp was starting to dim a little. Her heart skipped a beat. The batteries were running low, faster than expected. She quickly turned it off to save power. Instantly, darkness swallowed everything. It was so complete, so total, that she couldn't even see her hand when she held it right in front of her face. Maya sat perfectly still in the darkness. This was what true blindness must feel like. She could feel the weight of the mountain pressing down above her. Thousands of tons of rock separated her from the sky. For a moment, panic started to rise in her chest. Her breathing got faster. No, she told herself firmly. Stay calm. Stay focused. She turned her headlamp back on, but kept it on the lowest setting. The dim light was enough to see the immediate area around her. She would have to be very careful with her battery power from now on. Maybe use the light for 15 minutes, then sit in darkness for 15 minutes. It would be hard, but necessary. Maya got up and continued walking, following the sound of running water. The underground stream was getting louder, which meant she was getting closer to it. When she finally reached it, she felt a small surge of hope. The water was clear and cold. It must be flowing from somewhere, and water always finds a way to the surface eventually. She decided to follow the stream. It led her through passages that got narrower and narrower. Sometimes, she had to squeeze through gaps that barely fit her body. The rock scraped against her jacket and backpack. She could feel bruises forming on her shoulders and hips, but she kept going. After several more hours of walking and climbing, Maya found herself in a large cavern. She sat down to rest again and realized something disturbing. She was starting to talk to herself. First, it was just small comments. Okay, this way looks better. Watch that loose rock. But then she found herself having actual conversations with nobody. The silence was doing something to her mind. Humans weren't meant to be this alone, she thought. We need sound. We need connection. She started thinking about her sister, Priya. They hadn't spoken in almost 6 months after a terrible argument about their mother's care. Maya had said some harsh things. Priya had said harsh things back. And then, they both just stopped talking. Sitting in this cave, possibly facing the end of her life, Maya felt incredibly foolish. What had they even been fighting about? Why had she let pride keep her from picking up the phone? She would give anything right now to hear Priya's voice, even if she was yelling. Maya realized she was crying. Tears rolled down her dusty face, leaving clean tracks. She wiped them away quickly. Crying wouldn't help. She needed to save her energy and her water. But the loneliness was becoming as dangerous as the physical challenges of the cave. She forced herself to stand up and keep moving. As she walked, she started singing. Her voice sounded strange and small in the vast darkness, but it helped. She sang songs her mother used to sing when Maya was little. She sang pop songs from the radio. She sang badly and off-key, but it didn't matter. The sound of a human voice, even her own, pushed back against the oppressive silence. The stream led her to a fork in the cave. She had to choose which way to go. Both passages looked equally promising. Maya marked the wall with her chalk and chose the left passage. It sloped downward, which worried her a bit. She wanted to go up, toward the surface, but the water was flowing this way, so she followed. The passage opened into another chamber, and Maya stopped suddenly. Her headlamp illuminated something unexpected on the wall. Paintings. Ancient paintings. There were handprints in red ochre, and drawings of animals. Someone had been here before. Long ago, other humans had stood in this exact spot. Maya walked closer and touched one of the handprints. It was smaller than her own hand. Maybe a woman or a young person from thousands of years ago had pressed their hand against this wall. They had been in this darkness too. And they had survived. They had found their way out. This simple realization gave Maya more hope than anything else. She wasn't the first person to face this challenge. Maya had lost track of time completely. Her watch said it was the third day. But down here, in the eternal darkness, time felt meaningless. She had been following the underground stream for what seemed like forever. Her food was gone now. She had eaten the last energy bar hours ago, and all she had left were a few packages of emergency electrolyte powder. The hunger wasn't the worst part, though. It was the silence. Even when she sang or talked to herself, the moment she stopped, that heavy quiet came rushing back. It felt like the darkness had a sound of its own. A deep, endless nothing that pressed against her ears and made her head feel strange. She had started rationing her headlamp more strictly. 15 minutes of light, then 30 minutes of darkness. During those dark periods, she would sit completely still, just listening to her own breathing. In and out, in and out. Sometimes she wondered if she was going crazy. She had begun having conversations with people who weren't there. Long talks with her mother about recipes. Arguments with her sister that ended differently than the real one had. Discussions with her old professor about cave formations. Maya knew these were just her mind's way of coping with the isolation, but they felt so real. Sometimes, she would reach out in the darkness, half expecting to touch someone's hand. Of course, there was never anyone there. Just cold rock and damp air. The stream had led her through countless chambers and tunnels. Some were so beautiful, they took her breath away. Even in her exhausted state, crystal formations hung from the ceiling, like frozen waterfalls. In other places, columns of stone rose from the floor, created by thousands of years of dripping water. Under different circumstances, she would have spent hours studying and photographing them. But now, all she could think about was finding a way out. Her body was getting weaker. She could feel it in her legs when she climbed, in her arms when she pulled herself through tight spaces. She was running on empty, and she knew it. Maya turned a corner and found herself at a dead end. A solid wall of rock blocked her path. No, she thought. No, no, no. She had followed this stream for so long. It had to lead somewhere. She searched the walls frantically with her dim headlamp, looking for any crack, any opening. There was nothing. The chamber was sealed. The stream seemed to disappear into tiny cracks at the base of the wall, too small for even a hand to fit through. Maya felt her legs give out beneath her. She sank to the ground, her back against the cold stone wall. This was it. She had made the wrong choice back at that fork in the cave. If she went back now, she would have to retrace hours of walking and climbing. She didn't know if she had the strength left. Her headlamp was nearly dead. She had no food. Very little water remained in her bottle. Maya sat in the darkness and let herself feel the despair for a moment. She thought about her family, her mother, who would be heartbroken, her father, who had always worried about her dangerous job, her sister Priya, who she would never get to apologize to. She thought about all the things she had taken for granted: sunlight, fresh air, the sound of birds, her comfortable bed, hot coffee in the morning. She must have dozed off because she woke up suddenly, confused about where she was. For a beautiful moment, she thought she was at home. Then reality crashed back down. She was still in the cave, still trapped, still alone, but something was different. Maya sat very still, trying to figure out what had changed. Then, she felt it. The faintest movement of air against her face. Wind. There was wind coming from somewhere. She turned on her headlamp, knowing she was using up precious battery life, but not caring anymore. She stood up and moved around the chamber slowly, trying to find the source of the air current. It wasn't coming from the dead end. It wasn't coming from the passage she had entered through. Maya looked up. High above her head, maybe 20 feet up, there was a crack in the ceiling. It was narrow, but air was definitely flowing through it. And unless she was imagining things, she could see something. A very faint lightness. Not sunlight exactly, but something less dark than the total blackness of the cave. Her heart started pounding. This could be it. This could be the way out. But how would she get up there? The walls were smooth. There were no handholds that she could see. She had her climbing rope, but nothing to anchor it to. Maya sat down and forced herself to think clearly. She had training for this. She had solved difficult climbing problems before. The wall wasn't completely smooth. There were small ledges, tiny cracks. It would be incredibly difficult, especially in her weakened state. But it was possible. She knew that if she tried and failed, if she fell from that height, she could be seriously hurt. Maybe hurt so badly that she couldn't continue. But what choice did she have? Go back and try to find another route? She didn't have the time or energy for that. Maya checked her climbing gear carefully. She still had her rope, her carabiners, and her climbing shoes. She changed out of her boots and into the climbing shoes. They felt strange on her tired, sore feet. She tied the rope around her waist and secured it properly. Then she began to climb. The first few feet were the hardest. Maya's fingers searched for holds that were barely there. Tiny bumps in the rock. Small cracks where she could wedge her fingertips. Her climbing shoes gripped the wall, but every muscle in her body was screaming. She hadn't eaten real food in over a day. Her strength was almost gone. She climbed slowly, testing each hold before putting her weight on it. 5 feet up, then 7 feet, then 10. She didn't look down. Looking down would only make her panic. Instead, she focused on the crack above her. On that faint hint of lighter darkness that meant air and space, and maybe, just maybe, freedom. Her hand slipped. For a terrifying second, she hung by just her feet and her other hand. Her heart hammered in her chest, so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She pressed her face against the cold rock and waited for her breathing to slow down. 12 feet. 15 feet. Her arms were shaking now, not just tired, but actually trembling with exhaustion. Sweat dripped into her eyes despite the cold. Every movement took enormous concentration. Reach up, find a hold, test it, pull up, move the feet, repeat, over and over. At 18 feet, Maya made a mistake. She put her weight on a hold that looked solid, but wasn't. The small ledge of rock broke off in her hand. She fell. For a moment that seemed to last forever, she was in free fall. Then the rope caught her. She slammed against the wall, knocking the wind out of her lungs. Pain exploded in her shoulder and her ankle. She hung there, spinning slowly, gasping for air. When she could finally breathe again, Maya took stock of her injuries. Her shoulder hurt badly. Not broken, she didn't think, but definitely damaged. Her ankle was worse. She could feel it swelling inside her climbing shoe. When she tried to put weight on it, sharp pain shot up her leg. She hung there in the darkness, fighting back tears. This was too much. She was too tired, too hurt, too alone. Maybe she should just lower herself down and rest. Maybe she should give up. But then she heard it. A sound that wasn't her breathing. A sound that wasn't dripping water. It was wind, moving through that crack above her. And with the wind came the very faint sound of something else. Was that a bird? Had she really heard a bird calling somewhere far above? Maya looked up. She was so close. Maybe 5 more feet to the crack. 5 feet between her and the outside world. 5 feet between giving up and surviving. She grabbed the rope and started climbing again. This time, she used the rope more, pulling herself up and using the wall just for balance. Her injured ankle was useless now, so she had to rely more on her arms and her good leg. It was slow and painful, but she kept moving. 4 feet away, 3 feet, 2 feet. Her arms felt like they were on fire. Her hands were raw and bleeding, but she could see the crack clearly now. It was narrow, but she thought she could fit through it if she could just reach it. One more pull. One more reach. Her hand touched the edge of the crack. She pulled with everything she had left. Her head and shoulders squeezed into the narrow opening. The rock scraped her back and her arms. She wiggled and pushed, and then suddenly, she was through. Maya found herself in a vertical shaft. It went up and up, further than her dying headlamp could reach. But there was light coming from above. Real light. Daylight. She could see it, far above her, like a star in the darkness. She started to laugh. It came out sounding a bit crazy, echoing in the shaft. But she didn't care. There was a way out. She had found it. But her relief quickly faded as she realized the next challenge. The shaft went straight up for what looked like at least 50 or 60 feet. The walls were rough, which was good for climbing, but she was already exhausted and injured. Could she make it? She had to. There was no other choice. Maya positioned herself in the shaft, with her back against one wall and her feet against the other. This was called chimney climbing. She had done it before in practice, but never when she was this tired, this hurt, this desperate. She began to inch her way upward. Push with the legs. Press with the back. Move up a few inches. Rest. Breathe. Repeat. It was agonizingly slow. Every few feet, she had to stop and rest because her muscles simply wouldn't work anymore. During these breaks, she would hang in the shaft, wedged between the walls, and just focus on breathing. Hours passed. Or maybe it was just minutes that felt like hours. Time had lost all meaning. There was only the climb. Only the next few inches. Only the light above that grew slowly, impossibly slowly, brighter. Her headlamp finally died completely. But it didn't matter anymore, because there was enough natural light now to see by. Real daylight, filtering down from above. It was the most beautiful thing Maya had ever seen. She looked up and could see the opening now. It was maybe 20 feet above her. So close. She could see blue sky. Actual sky. Clouds drifting past. The sight gave her a burst of energy she didn't know she had left. 10 feet. Her injured shoulder was agony now, but she pushed through it. 5 feet. She could feel fresh air on her face, could smell pine trees and earth. 3 feet. She was crying now, tears streaming down her filthy face. And then her hand reached over the edge. She pulled herself up, her broken body screaming in protest, and collapsed onto solid ground.